Good afternoon, y'all. This is the Bookly Blessed podcast. Today I'm going to be reading my Uncle Rudy's answers. This is the man who is married to my Aunt Patty. I have already read her answers about nursing in the 60s and 70s. This is also going to be in relation to the same book, the first in the Peyton's Pride series. The book is named Peyton's Pride. It is the first in the series of the same name. And I'll be reading his answers about his time in the Marine Corps during the Vietnam War. And he opted to go the same route as his wife because he's just not fond of the camera either. So let's just go ahead and get started on this. And we will, I just got to get my technology going for me. Um, so my Uncle Rudy has always been kind of the zany member of the family, and we love him for that, you know. But he was also part of the equation of me wanting to be a Marine as I was growing up. Him and then my cousin Rudy, Rudy 3. My grandfather's name was Rudy, and then my uncle's name is Rudy, and then my cousin's name is Rudy. And so 1, 2, 3 senior, junior, and then Rudy 3. And then I have a cousin, a second cousin, Rudy 4, who I have not yet had the privilege of getting to meet, and he is also a Marine. So there's quite the legacy of United States Marines in this family, in that branch of the Denke family. Uh, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I will be commenting on some of the things that I asked him to answer for me because when I was writing this book, once again, this is the book that is set in 1970. It starts and it ends in 1973. Again, I was nervous about writing this book. I was born in 1976. I don't know that much about the 70s at all. I was a child born in the latter half of the 70s, just way beyond my wheelhouse. So I'm asking the people who lived it, who knew about the things that I'm trying to write with some form of, I'm not going to say authority, but factual knowledge about. And so the people who were there and they lived it and they did the things that my characters are doing, I'm trying to ask for their expertise on that. So let's get started. Um, I started by asking my Uncle Rudy, um, how did one receive orders for a new duty station? Now, keep in mind, I was in the Army. I did end up in the Army because, again, I fell in love with an Army man when I was on my way into the Marine Corps. And just to keep the family together and for the sake of smoothness and peace and happiness, I went into the Army myself. So that's why I'm asking kind of stranger questions of my Marine Corps uncle. How did one receive orders for a new duty station? And he answered, I received written orders for transfer, which is pretty typical. That's also the way I got orders. I served from 2003 to 2011. So I thought that maybe my experience might be different than his from, we'll find out later on, when he joined the Marines. So quite a few decades in between my time of service in the United States Army and his time of service in the United States Marine Corps. And then, because it's pertinent to the Peyton's Pride series, I asked him, did a POW's family receive his pay while he was imprisoned? And my uncle said a POW received his pay while he was in prison, but I didn't have any experience with POWs while I was in the Marine and then I said, how did household goods work? Now, for me, with my experience in, the 2000s, we are referring to household goods. That's the things that a military member has that they want to carry around the world with them when they move from one duty station to the next. Uh, you know, grandma's hope chest, that dining room table that your daddy helped you build, the things that make a home for you, you want to carry believe it or not, you do want to carry around the world with you when you move from one place to the next. Some people just have a moving sale and sell everything and rebuy it when they go to a new place, and that kind of adds to the adventure of moving around every couple of years. Is having a whole new household when you get there and start getting settled in. But most of us choose to carry our precious treasures with us, which doesn't always work out, by the way. And he was kind of like, well, personal property belonged to the individuals, and property and base housing belonged to the Marine Corps. Now, when my husband and I first married, keep in mind, my husband was in the Army and I was not in the military yet. I was on my way into the Marines when we met. And so we had nothing. He was a single soldier and I was a young college student when we met. And so we had nothing. And when we got to Germany, the Army actually was kind enough to give us a dining room table with chairs. They gave us a couch. They even gave us a bed frame. We had to have our own mattress, and we went and got that and things like that. And so that was the military's furniture that they just loaned us while we were there. And that's kind of what he was referring to. And he seemed, when he answered the question, like, why would you ask me this? I'm like, I get it, but it's pertinent to the book. You'll have to read the book, Uncle Rudy. And he's like, dang it, I don't want to read a romance. Okay, well, Aunt Patty will read it to you, or she can tell you about it. Okay, so moving on. And then, and forgive me if this seems kind of random pattern. I'm writing these questions down to ask my uncle later as I'm writing the book. So as the question pops into my head, I write the question down. And then when I found out that my uncle didn't want to be on camera either, I just sent him my list of questions. And then he just, I think Aunt Patty, bless her, probably read him the questions. He answered them, and then she probably wrote the answers that he gave her down and sent them back to me. So I said my next question was, how did a battlefield promotion from enlisted to commissioned work? Now, right now, in the book that is currently out with my reviewers, I don't spend a lot of time pointing this out, but there is a part where you will see Adam Payton go and enlist in the Marines. And then later on in the book, you will see someone refer to him as Captain Payton, which would make him no longer enlisted. Now he's a commissioned officer in the Marines. Now, someone like my Uncle Rudy's going to be like, wait a minute, how did he become captain all of a sudden? And I'm not sure if I'm going to point it out in the first book or one of the future Paytons is going to talk about it later in another book. There's a very distinct possibility that could happen either way. So I may go back and point it out in Adam and Elena's story, or I may let one of the future Paytons point it out. But let me answer the question in my uncle's words. How did a battlefield promotion from enlisted to commissioned work? And he said, battlefield promotion. The ranking officer of that particular unit informed the Marine. Usually, a battlefield promotion to officer occurred because the other officers were killed or wounded and they needed a leader. Now, that may seem pretty morbid, or maybe if you've watched any kind of, Civil War or World War I, World War II, Korean War, or Vietnam War movies, you might have seen that. Like, it was a particularly brutal battle, and the ranking officer turned and looked at someone who just did really great during the battle, regardless of how the battle turned out. And he said to that soldier, all right, well, congratulations, you're now in charge. You are no longer Sergeant so and so. Now you are Lieutenant or Captain so and so. And so that actually happens to Adam Payton in this story. And because this first book is a tough one for me. I'm not going to say it's going to be tough for you to read. I think you're really going to enjoy reading about how Adam and Elena come from two worlds apart and end up together. Um, I think you're really going to enjoy it, but I don't go into a great deal of detail about Adam's time in Vietnam, just because two things. It's been done a lot. The Vietnam era has been done a lot, and plus, it's just out of my wheelhouse. Again, I'm taking great pains to be accurate and make sure that I'm not being ridiculous. uh, um, so I'm just kind of letting that part of the story flow. But I did want you to understand that that's why I asked my uncle that question, because I thought it was possible he may have seen that happen. And according to his answer, he probably did. Uh, okay. So I then went on to ask, if Adam had been, you know, a sergeant or a corporal at some point when he um, made himself stand out to higher uh, officials, leadership, um, then it could have happened again where he was quickly promoted again to another higher rank officer. And so I asked, could another promotion be handed out in short order? And my uncle said sometimes promotions were given for gallantry, which Adam would be that kind of man. And then I asked, did Marines drink the Kool-Aid then like they do now? Did they love being Marines like they do now? Um, my uncle's answer was Kool-Aid. Marines drank Cham Pipple, 7 Up, and Ripple wine. Very inexpensive. I may have offended my uncle a little bit with that question. And I asked it that way because in my modern experience in the military, we used that expression, drink the Kool-Aid, because, for instance, when I was no longer in the military, but I was working for the military as a civilian, I I got a job working for the 82nd Airborne Division. Now, um, I don't know how much you, as my reader and a person watching or listening to this podcast, knows about the 82nd Airborne Division in the United States Army, but they're very storied. They have a glowing history. They are very they are a very famous division in the United States Army, and I believe the United States military. Um, they got their start in World War One, and they have just been literally um, lighting up the skies with their their military might and their prowess in battle. Um, so keep in mind, most military people end up with a certain measure of pride, um, in their unit, their fellow soldier or airman or sailor or marine, and provided they don't end up in a bad unit with terrible leadership that just destroys morale and people don't want to be there. Most people who do some time in service, they end up with a lot of pride, and they adopt their fellow soldiers as their family, and they do just about anything for them. And so there's usually that level that kind of separates service members from average American civilians. There's always going to be um, teachers or coaches or organizations like that where you do still have your organizational pride. Um, But the service members are just a little bit different, a little bit more ingrained. They have a little bit more of that. It's just, um, it's a little bit hard to explain, honestly. I've just been surrounded by service members for so long. It's hard to put my finger on that for someone who has never spent a moment in the service. Um, so going back to the 82nd Airborne Division, when I got there from being in other military units my whole career, it was very shocking for me that everyone had tattoos and they had license plate frames and they had stickers on their cars and they had t-shirts and hoodies and hats. And I was just kind of like, what in the world? And someone told me, oh, everybody drinks the Kool-Aid. Don't worry, you'll have your own tattoo here in a minute. And I was just like, I'm a civilian. And they were like, it doesn't matter. You gonna have a tattoo in a minute. And I was just like, okay. And by the time I was done working there, I had drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid. I didn't get a tattoo, but I still, to this day, across the country from where the 82nd Airborne Division is, uh, headquartered, I can spot a hat or a sticker on somebody's car. And, oh, hey, there's my people. So I get it. And the Marine Corps is decidedly, I think that your average American civilian can pinpoint a Marine a mile away because that pride just shines out. And you always know when you're talking to a Marine. You always know. And that's why I asked my uncle, did they drink the Kool-Aid back then like they do now? And I think, like I mentioned, I think you may have been a little offended. I'm sorry, Uncle Rudy. I did not mean to offend you. I was just using a term that I'm used to. um, Maybe you'll have to make some of that. What did you call it? The, oh, the cham pipple. Maybe you'll have to make some of that next time I visit you. We'll have to figure that one out together. And he said, Marines always carried Marine pride. Yes, they love the Corps. And I figured that was probably the case back then because um, it's it was evident in him when I met him as a small child. I think I probably met him when I was born. I don't know. But uh, I remember meeting him again when I was 6 years old after having lived across the country from where he was and just knowing that he was a different person than I had ever known before. And he probably told me within, I don't know, 35 seconds of saying, hi, welcome back to where you used to be, uh, that he had been in the Marine Corps. It was just a very instant thing, and it was something that we always knew that Uncle Rudy was a Marine, Cousin Rudy would be a Marine, and, just so on and so on. So moving on, because I went on that subject for quite a few minutes, didn't I? um, and then I asked him, when did you join the Marines? And he said that he went to boot camp in 1962. Let's keep in mind, Aunt Patty, his wife, graduated from nursing school in 1968. And I believe that was probably, yeah, I think in California, where we'll find out later how that connected. Okay. I asked him, what was your favorite part of being a Marine? And he said, my favorite part of being in the Marines was meeting my wife at the main gate of Camp Pendleton, which is in San Diego, California. I like the camaraderie of being a Marine. And I can see how that just really gets into, the the camaraderie is an important thing. You know, even just being in the army, um, that's kind of the thing that keeps people in the military is that sense of family. If you've read all my books, you will notice that on the brothers I choose, I talk about knowing how you can feel found when you join the military, any branch. When when you're counting on the person next to you to literally be your ride or die. Like we ride forward together or we die together, you kind of get close. You know what I mean? So I can understand how that really was a selling factor for him, the camaraderie for him. And then I asked him what his favorite duty station was, and he said aboard ship, the USS Bear. I don't know anything about the USS Bear. Maybe that's something I should look up just to see what he was talking about. That'd be kind of cool. And I said, "What is your fondest memory of being in the Marines?" And he said he enjoyed the travel opportunities and he got to see a great deal of the Orient, which makes sense during the Vietnam era, right? Um, what was post deployment leave called? What did the Marines call a deployment? Post deployment leave was just called leave. A deployment was called a deployment. And I asked him that because I wasn't sure if that was a term that had changed over the decades. Because somebody's always got to have a good idea and change everything to include terms of what we call something. So I asked him the question because I wanted to make sure that I was using the right word in the book. Um, how much time was a POW given before going back to work? A POW returning to work, he doesn't know the answer to that. Because again, he had no dealings with POWs when he was in Vietnam. And I asked that because when in the army, when a soldier is wounded in combat, he gets a certain amount of time to recover, and the doctor treating him will say how much time that's going to be. I've even heard of a doctor ordering, you know, 12 months of convalescent leave. So I don't know the answer. My uncle didn't know the answer. I've asked the Department of the Navy that answer, and they didn't know the answer. I have reached out to the Department of the Marine Corps, and I have not really heard back. Well, that's not true. I think I did hear back, but I didn't get definitive answers from them. So, sorry, Marines. I didn't mean to be, you know, misquoting or saying that y'all were ignoring me. I know you're not. um, okay, and then I asked if my Aunt Patty, Uncle Rudy's wife, was allowed to go to his permanent duty stations with him. And he said, "Well, yeah, Aunt Patty and I lived at Wire Mountain Housing on Camp Pendleton when he was stationed there." So that's cool. I didn't know if Marines in the 70s were allowed to bring their spouses. I know that now it's just a given. Your spouse is going just about everywhere with you unless you're deployed to a combat zone. And then um, a lot of times your spouse will be able to go somewhere near where you're going to be going. And don't quote me on this. um, where you're going to be going off into combat zones or whatever. But most of the time when you're deployed, it's like a year-long or 18-month-long deployment, and your spouse stays back at your duty station where you're being deployed from. So that's why I asked that question. Sorry if that was a convoluted explanation. Um, it it can get confusing, you know, because a lot of times when a service member comes home and tells the family, uh, I've got to go here, the family members, all of them, even the 4-year-old, will be like, "Are we going with you? Or is this the one where we have to stay back?" Just because it changes all the time. So there you have that answer. Okay. And then I asked if my uncle had spent any time at Paris Island, South Carolina, because that is also part of the Peyton's Pride book that I just recently finished. Um, and then uh, my uncle said, no, I went to boot camp at MCRD. So I'm going to say that is Marine Corps Recruit Depot at San Diego. And he was never at Parris Island. So um, my cousin Rudy, Uncle Rudy's and Aunt Patty's firstborn son, um, I will be reaching out to him and seeing if he would be willing to answer similar questions. They may change a little. Um, of course, he was not in the Marines in the 70s. He was a child. He's just a little bit older than me. So uh, he was actually the first grandchild in in on my maiden name, the Denke side of the family. He was the first grandchild. So um, that that ties up all the questions that I have for my uncle. Uncle Rudy, thank you so much for answering my questions to the best of your abilities. And again, if any of my questions were offensive in any way, I do apologize. I did try very hard to be careful not to pick at any scabs that might be left over from your time in service during the Vietnam War. Uh, I appreciate your service to our country. Thank you. Thank you for leaving a legacy for not only your own family, but the rest of your extended family to follow. My little brother followed you into the Marines as well. I was going to, but we have already discussed that I fell in love with an Army man who I am still very much madly in love with. And I decided to join the Army myself to keep the peace and be able to stay with my husband and children. So, again, thank you for not only answering my questions, but serving our country and just being such a fun and exciting part of our family for so many decades. And now you are the patriarch of our family, and just thank you for leading us through all this, stuff that we always are going through. I appreciate you. And to my listeners and watchers and readers, thank you for being here. Y'all, of course, know that my books are available on booklyblessed.com. And uh, I have been receiving the questions of when is your new book coming out? My new books, plural, will be launching, uh, it looks like November 2nd now, 2024. Um, just keep listening to these podcasts, watching them, and subscribe to the YouTube channel while you're there, please. And share with your friends and family who like books and like cool stories, And I hope to get to introduce you to my mama pretty soon. She will be interviewing with me about this book as well, giving me the insight of a young woman, a young Christian woman in the 70s, and she will let's just go ahead and give you a little flash into what that's going to look like here. Um, Elena, my character in the Peyton's Pride book, is heavily based on my mama. So I'm excited to introduce you to the woman that I'm trying to pattern myself after, and she is also my editor and the inspiration for so many things. And you will remember, if you have read all my books, that she is the first dedication in my first book. All right, y'all, thanks for being here. Y'all take care. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.